Good afternoon. My name is Paul Burke. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of NT Farmers Association here in the Northern Territory. We'll just wait a minute while everyone comes in to the conference, and then we'll kick off. So just bear with us for a moment. We've got Tony Mahar joining us today. He's standing there in front of us waiting to kick off. So give us 30 seconds and we'll be underway. Righto, let's kick off. So the Growing the Territory webinar series, this is number 9. Today we've got Tony Mahar, the Chief Executive Officer of National Farmers Federation, joining us. Thanks, Tony. Maybe, Tony, if you just give us a little bit of an intro about what you've been up to and where you see the state of play at the moment.
Yeah, g'day, Paul. G'day, everyone. Thanks for having me. A great opportunity to talk to you. Much rather be in the Territory. It's pretty cold in Canberra at this stage, but thanks for the opportunity to have a chat. Yeah, look, it's been fascinating. Everyone's been using the word unprecedented last 6 months, really, but by and large, I think agriculture hasn't been as devastated as some of the other sectors. Certainly tourism and hospitality, I know the Territory's taken a big hit up there in that space, but agriculture, I'm cautious when I say that, but we're better placed than some, certainly. So I think now the opportunity is to sort of, the dust starting to settle is what we can do as an industry to make sure we drive out of this space. But as ever, COVID aside, there's lots of issues that are on our plates. I know we'll talk about some of them today, but labour and availability and, environmental engagement with the agriculture sector, trade, obviously. So there's lots of issues that are ongoing despite the challenges that COVID have presented, Paul. So,
all right, well, let's kick off, Tony, and just to give you a bit of background, we've been trying to work out some pathways to address our labour shortages and issues here in the Territory, and I guess they've been exacerbated in this current year even more than previous years. We always struggle in the remote and the regional areas to get workforce.
Yep.
So in that context, have you got any advice to growers and producers about what they could be doing now to try and alleviate some of those workforce issues coming in to the impending season? Always get the question straight up, by the way, Tony. They get easier, I promise.
Thanks. I wish I had a simple answer for that one. I think you're right. It's exacerbated right at the moment. I know it's been an issue for some time, and it's just been compounded and made more difficult by the inability of people to travel. I suppose the simple advice would be to try and come together as much as we can as an industry from a Territory point of view, but a national point of view as well, to just keep telling and talking to government about what the issues are and propose some solutions. So, are there boutique sort of arrangement situations where, workers can come in on some sort of secure, safe arrangement? That's what we've got to keep putting up. I don't necessarily see sort of relaxing of travel restrictions more broadly anytime soon, particularly if, we get a situation like in Victoria where there's potentially a second wave up there. I know the Territory and also the Territory here in Canberra has been really good in terms of outbreaks and stuff like that. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we're in a good place. But really, we just have to keep talking to government, saying these are the issues that we're facing, and quantify them as much as we possibly can in terms of number of workers and for how long and where they'll go, and just sort of break it down into specifics. But the clear, coordinated, consistent message to government is going to be helpful in that space. I don't think there are any really easy solutions just at the moment because of the circumstances, but we have to just keep telling and working with government to try and come up with some of those solutions, Paul.
So that probably leads pretty well into my next question, and it's probably the one I get asked the most at the moment by growers, and that is around, we've built a reliance on seasonal workers, and there's been really good uptake of bringing the Pacific labour workforce in the territory, and a lot of businesses have actually come to rely on that now, and that avenue doesn't appear to be open to us at the moment. So do you think there's any pathways for this season that could be explored to actually try and bring that seasonal worker into the territory? Because there's not too many plan Bs for us. We don't have a large amount of people floating around. The backpackers are predominantly left. So, you know, have you got any thoughts in that space?
Well, again, it would be some sort of proposal to government to say, look, these are the, so data is obviously the key. If you get a bit of an idea of how many workers, you know, we're short, and I know that's hard because of the variation in farms and locations and sectors, and the potential of you know, those undocumented workers that are out there. You know, it's hard to get a number. So if we can actually say to government, look, it's 100, or if it's 300 or 3,000, whatever the number is, and say, this is what we think is short, these are the time frames, and we can look at potentially, if it was able to be done, you know, some sort of bubble arrangement between a country and a region like the territory, and we could bring workers in, resources in, and we can get some sort of subsidy from the government to actually help that. And I suspect it would be a cooperation between the territory government and the Commonwealth. The government is very aware of the labour shortages. As soon as this pandemic started, we said that was one of the key things from a national point of view, that we said to government, is that, you know, workers' availability for them to move across the country, so across borders, but also in and out of the country, is going to be a major issue. So the expansion or extension of visa arrangements was one of the first things that we actually said to government, is that there are people here, their visas are going to be expired. We must allow them to have some flexibility in that space. So they're aware of it, but as we come into, you know, the summer season, strict and you know, clear information to government around what we think could work. I think there's an opportunity for us to do that, definitely.
Yeah, I 100% agree that we need to create a pathway in some way. And interesting, the undocumented workers as well. I mean, there's a fairly large pool of those here in Australia. You know, how could we actually use that to our advantage? Because at the moment they're a risk in the COVID space as well, because they're unlikely to go to a doctor, they're unlikely to reach out if they're feeling unwell. So could that be part of the solution?
Yeah, I think it has to be, and you're right, it's a tricky one, right? Because no one likes to talk about undocumented workers, and it's hard to get a number on where they are and who they are, and you and the people on the call would know much more about it than me. So there is a risk there. So I think, Paul, for me, it's actually coming back to the numbers, and the VFF's Victorian Farmers Federation did a bit of a study down around Mildura and Sunraysia region and actually came up with some numbers. So the more that we can put forward some details and say, look, you know, even if it's tons of product or number of farms and turnover, those sorts of things, to say that we need X 100 workers, this is what normally happens, without sort of necessarily focusing on that. This is the normal amount of workers that we get. This is what the shortfall is. That, I think, data and evidence, as much as we can do that, is going to keep the doors open.
Which probably leads me into the next question. I know you and I have spoken about this ad nauseum over the last few years in terms of an ag-specific visa. And I know the Horticulture Council that sits under National Farmers Federation has spoken at length over the last couple of years. Are we any closer to getting an ag visa, and just give us a bit of background to where all that's at?
Yeah, so the short answer is we're no or not much closer to getting an ag visa. The government has, in the last 6-12 months, made some tweaks to the existing visa arrangements, which, you know, arguably have helped the situation. They haven't solved the problem, there's no doubt about that, but they have tried to tweak the current arrangements. So we've still got the ag visa on the table, because the message that we've been saying to government is all of those other visas, they're fine, they've got their own individual purpose, and look, they work in some vague sense, but they're not designed to solve the labour problem in the agriculture sector in the territory or across the country. So that's what we actually need. So we've not taken it off the table, but we're no close to actually getting it because of some of the changes that the government has made. They want to see, you know, whether they're working. And to be really honest, again, the issue that we face as an industry, and just a challenge that we've all got to collectively put our shoulder to the wheel on, is getting some more accurate data on what the shortfall is. So last year, the Prime Minister came and said to the NFF conference about, you know, putting the data on the table about what the shortfall is around workers. So that's a challenge, and I know how hard it is, because I've had conversations with growers across the country about getting this information. But that's what we've got to work harder at, is getting numbers to say, well, all of these visas, they're still not solving the problem. The tweaks that you've got, the current regime isn't helping us as much as an ag-specific visa is. So we've got to keep working. It's hard and it's frustrating. I know it, but that's what we've got to do.
So have you got any other comments on workforce at the moment? I know there's a national roundtable doing laps around the country at the moment, and everyone's feeding into it. I guess from a lot of growers' perspective, it's a little bit of deja vu, like, oh, another roundtable, when, you know, surely over the last 10 years, most of our issues have been raised on numerous occasions. Is there anything else in workforce that you think, you know, listeners might want to understand?
Well, one thing I can just let people know is that this week, in fact, it was yesterday, the Attorney General, as either part of the COVID situation or more broadly, has kicked off a process to look at the industrial relations system in Australia, and the NFF is part of that process. So we're on one of the working groups that are actually looking at and bringing up, identifying all of the challenges and potential solutions to some of the workforce issues, industrial relations issues. So agriculture sector does have a voice there, and that's a good thing. But you're right, it's not a new discussion, but I feel like right now the government has indicated that they're much more willing to have that chat about some of the structural economic reform, and industrial relations is one of those that we need as a sector, and arguably the country does. So we've got a voice around the table. The NFF is going to be sitting around that table. Did so yesterday. It was the first meeting with the Attorney General. So all of the other groups, you know, industry groups and unions and things are sitting there as well. So we do have a voice, and at least we're around the table to actually push our case.
Well, hopefully we see some flexibility in the awards at some stage.
Yeah.
On from workforce, coming out of COVID, what are the opportunities for North Australia in agriculture? And we've certainly been putting it out there that agriculture, especially in the Northern Territory, is going to actually be the driver. So resources, agriculture. We did have a strong tourism industry. That's not so strong at the moment, is probably the nicest way to put it. So there's some opportunity for us. So we really need to get front and centre. So where do you see the opportunities, and what's NFF been doing in the space around recovery?
Yeah, so we definitely agree that, you know, we're well placed as an industry. Sure, there's been some challenges, and hospitality closing down as retail sector has hit agricultural businesses. I'm sure they have in the Territory as well. But by and large, we're well placed, as I say, a lot better than other sectors. So what we've been saying to government from day one around this is make sure that agriculture can continue to operate. We haven't been affected, so we don't want to put the brakes on an industry that is actually going to be able to put food and fibre into the marketplace. So that was the first thing that we did, and we did a couple of things around the list of essential services that we gave to government, and so that was a good first hurdle to get over. Some of the other things that we did, and Paul, I'm pretty sure you got a copy of it, was the workplace guide to sort of provide to producers around how they could make workplaces safe and things. So practical things like that. So that's available still on our website, and that went to the Chief Medical Officer to give confidence to them, to the government, that agriculture was not only still in business, but doing things required to make sure that there wasn't outbreaks in processing plants and things like that. And as far as I'm aware, there's been only really one, and that's in the Cedar Meats processing plant in Victoria. By and large, the industry's done very well. But so is immediate sort of triage or emergency management, crisis management. But what we've done in the last couple of months since that time is to have ongoing chats, discussion with government. So we've got this document, and I hope you can see that, but that is about to be given to government, only putting the final touches on it this morning actually. So that document is a list of, there's 35 ideas. So it's ideas for economic recovery and policies that we're going to give to government and say, this is the long list of issues that we want you to do to make sure agriculture can continue to grow. So it's off the back of the hopefully some of you have seen it, that $100 billion roadmap that we've got, roadmap for a $100 billion industry by 2030. So it's part of that. But this is quite specific around the things that the policies and programs we want government to do in the next 6, 12, 24 months to make sure that we can continue to help drive the broader economy out of the COVID space. But it's things like, the red tape. It's things like infrastructure. And to your point, Paul, about, opening up the territory and opportunities for Northern Australia, it's through NT farmers, it's through NFF's long history with NTCA and infrastructure that has opened up sort of pastoral spaces where, other farming groups and other sectors and other enterprises have been able to prosper. So it's things like making those structural changes in infrastructure, and that's a key one. That'll help agriculture grow, but it's things like environmental legislation, to remove some of that green tape that allows development to continue. It's trade, obviously, being an export-orientated industry. It's protocols and certifications that allow more of our product to go offshore into some of these growing markets. So that document will go straight to the key decision makers. So obviously the Agriculture Minister, Fiona Simpson, the President, who I've been able to step into for today. So apologies, she hasn't been able to make it, but she's at a roundtable with Minister Littleproud today to discuss exactly that. And that document there is going to be handed over to the Minister. So it's a good basis, Paul, for the list of issues that we think need to happen to help drive agriculture.
So in terms of that document and recovery from COVID, have you had to reassess your $100 billion audacious goal? I mean, from an NT perspective, we've written into our strategic plan now to double our output over the next 5 years. So we're still fairly bullish about where agriculture is going, but from a national perspective, is that $100 billion target still on the table, or has it had to be reassessed?
No, it's still on the table. We're still running with it. I think there was an ABARES report either last week or the week before that said instead of 40 billion, so if the agriculture industry is valued at 60 billion when we started this conversation, it's now 61. So I only have to find 39 billion dollars. So it's still on the table. The drought has taken a fair whack out of it, and this will as well. But I think as economies around the world continue to sort of open up again, there's going to be continued huge demand for our products. So there's huge opportunity there, but we've got to get the settings right. And that's where that document that I just flashed up there is important. So we're sticking to the 100 billion. It's aspirational, but it's a good target. Everyone's bought into it. So yeah, it's definitely still on the table. We think we can do it.
Fantastic. And well, I know the Territory will be all pushing as hard as we can to do our little bit. In terms of the federal government, they're going to have a really big role to play in the broader recovery of industries across the regions. How well equipped are we to facilitate that at a national level? I mean, we've got a fair level of debt. So what is the role that government's going to play, do you think? Do you think there's going to be some policy work done to free up people to be able to invest and develop quicker? Are they the type of things you think federal government can assist with?
Yes, absolutely. So again, I don't want to keep referring to that document, but one of the things in there, one of the key sort of policies or proposals, concepts that we've put in there is regionalisation. So actually getting the Commonwealth to partner with state governments and picking, what we've put in there is 20 regional deals. So some people on the call might be familiar with these regional deals that the government's flagged, and what they do is they pick a region and sort of say, okay, this has got a few characteristics in it that we think can grow and provide growth for the communities, for the sectors. We've said pick 20 places around the country and really have a crack at these regional deals. They had, I think there's 4 or 5 that the Commonwealth's done at the moment, but it has to be a partnership with the Commonwealth and the state government, and that will drive things like education and infrastructure and potentially other sectors like tourism. But it's got to be focused and it's got to be long term. It can't just be a 3-year sort of election commitment to say, okay, we're going to pick Central Australia or Northern Australia or a particular region. But regionalisation right at the moment, because everyone's been used to working from home and things like that, it's a perfect opportunity to say to government, well, there you go. People don't have to live on the eastern seaboard and major CBD areas to actually contribute and work. We've proved people can work from home and work remotely. So why not focus on rural and regional Australia and get some injection of funds, investment in there. But as we all know, it has to be a partnership between states and Commonwealth. It can't just be Commonwealth throwing money in. It's got to be a true partnership, and that's, I know, has been a challenge for all states, but the territory as well.
I know from our office up here, we did relocate to home for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, right at the height of it. We all moved home, all of the staff moved home. And I've got to say, and this is not a question, you might want to comment on it, but our telecommunications, our NBN network actually held up really well in the bush.
Yep.
And when we did our original risk matrix, that was one of our key concerns, was whether the network was actually going to hold for us. And I think we've actually proven now that we can do a lot more things remotely. So I don't know whether you got any comments on that, but from a national level, or from a local level, it's been really pleasing that we haven't had interruptions. Like if we go back 3, 4, 5 years ago and this had happened, we would have been in a world of pain. Yeah,
I agree. It has, I think, there's always going to be some challenges for people in particular areas, and even in Canberra, it sounds crazy, but even the technology, sometimes fails and you can be in a bit of a black spot, but I imagine it's a lot worse in other parts of the country. So it's the perfect time. People have proved that you don't necessarily need to be flying around the country or located in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane or Darwin to actually contribute and attend meetings. So I think everyone's realised that it's a real opportunity to reassess how we do things, and that means that hopefully people will be attracted to remote rural areas that they might not have been already, previously.
I know my wife's looking forward to the airlines starting up again. I think this is the longest I've ever had to spend at home and also working at home when she was working at home. I think she would have driven me to the airport and left me to sit there for 3 weeks till the plane came. That's a whole other issue.
I suspect a few people will be in that space too.
So in terms of 1 or 2 or 3 key areas you think we can grow, I think from a territory point of view, cotton's really exciting for us, and broadacre that probably hasn't been on the radar. But nationally, is there some other trends that we're seeing, or other areas that you think there's going to be really big growth in?
Well, horticulture always springs to my mind. And I know, having been up in the territory last year, a bit earlier in the year, but horticulture just seems like a natural growth sector that we can really get a few $1 billion out of that industry, and the issue is, of course, going to be for the southern areas, at least water availability. I know that's not necessarily as much of an issue in the north, but horticulture definitely just feels like an area where we've got huge potential to grow. Development of things like, I know there's a huge long history of mangoes, but citrus up there. I know Tipperary stations have put in citrus trees and grapes and things like that. So that is always the one that in my mind seems like an obvious one.
Yeah, that diversification, I agree completely.
And agriculture, got to say, I know agriculture is another area where I think there's huge growth.
I think there's really big opportunity in agriculture too for our Indigenous Australians as well to participate in that longer term. And I really think the Territory is well placed to do that. Mm-hmm. Just moving on to outside of Australia, there's been a lot of trade tensions. There's been some decisions made by some of our major trading partners. So where do you think those geopolitical issues are going to go? And do you think they're going to have an impact longer term on our exports? I know that's a tough question.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty troubling. Like, it is being so export orientated and dominated. I mean, depending on what industry it is, but let's go with 65-75% of the products produced in this country go out, offshore. So we're always going to be interested and influenced and impacted by geopolitical dynamics and tensions. And it has been a bit of a worry to see what's been happening with markets like China. I mean, there's been other instances over the years, and that's just in some ways part of the landscape. So I think there's a couple of things that we've been doing, and I think we need to continue to do, is just to keep making sure that government are aware of the sensitivities and the impact that of trade blockages or trade disruptions, and there is always going to be disruptions in the market, but we've just got to try and do whatever we can to reduce those disruptions. The other thing is that we've got to continue as producers and as an industry to focus on doing what we can, and that is producing amazing quality, safe, traceable, sustainable products. We will find a market for it. Australian produce, food and fibre is highly regarded around the world. So unfortunately, if there are disruptions, we're going to have to be nimble enough to say, okay, well, where else can we direct that product? And relationships take a long time to build up. And you don't want to dismiss them, or you don't want to undermine them in any way. But if we've got good quality, safe, traceable, sustainable products, I'm confident that we can, as an industry, find markets for that. People around the world will always want to get high quality, safe, affordable products, and we're pretty good at that. So we've got to continue to do that, continue to look for efficiencies and reduce our costs. That's day-to-day business for everyone. And then hopefully the markets will still be there. So diversification, as some of these things come up, I mean, it's hard. A market like China, such an awesome market, really. I mean, the growth there and the opportunities. But there's other markets too, I mean, there's other markets. You see Indonesia, free trade agreement being signed with Indonesia this year, 250 odd million people there, growing disposable income, lots of history and already established relationships there. That's got to present opportunities.
So I guess just to round this out and close up and try and be on time for once in my life, if you had to give one bit of advice to growers and producers, and what would that be? And I sort of put it through a lens of COVID, because no one ever thought we were going to be in this situation. And, my belief is the farming industry was actually better placed because we were used to dealing with biosecurity. Yep. Biosecurity wasn't a dirty word for us. It's been integrated in our businesses for a long time. So I think we understood better than other industries what was required. But from your point of view, is there one bit of advice you could give growers to focus on over the next 12 months? Or
I think biosecurity is a good one. I think just what I was saying, just keep doing what the industry's been doing, and across the country, but particularly in the territory, keep producing that product that is renowned and demanded across the globe, across the country. That's what we've got the most control over, and that's what we, I know there's various challenges. Just got to keep working at improving efficiencies and trying to reduce costs and trying to get better market, better value, better return on investment for the product. So that's a big enough job on its own. So, but biosecurity is part of those things. Like, we've been saying for the last 6 months that farmers are experts at working from home. The experts around biosecurity. It's what the business is built on. Keeping pests and diseases away. So we're pretty well placed, I'd say, and just keep on doing what people have been doing. And the other is through organisations like yours, Paul. Keep getting a coordinated message. Keep working, with the national body and keep talking and keep advocating on these issues. There's plenty of challenges, but the more we can be coordinated and united and provide data on it, again, I don't underestimate how difficult it is, but the more we can give government facts on what we're facing and put up potential solutions, the more likely we are to get success. So that would be my advice.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks very much for joining us. We as an industry up here, we really value National Farmers Federation. We value our membership. We're really excited about the Horticulture Council and where that's going, and that united voice and the coming together, sharing of ideas. So on behalf of all of the members of NT Farmers, thanks for all the work you're doing, Tony. It is appreciated. You don't often get told those things in an advocacy role, I can assure you, but we do appreciate it. And I know you've got our best interests around workplace and workforce at heart, and you know the clear message that we're trying to achieve. So thanks very much.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Paul, and thanks for having me, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of the Friday and a good weekend.
Fantastic. Now, for next week, we've got Alistair Trier, the Chief Executive of Department of Primary Industries and Resources on. So if you've got any questions, please flick them through to me prior, or put them in the chat box down the bottom next week. Please stay safe, look after yourselves, spend 10 or 15 minutes on yourself, look outside your business as well as look inside your business. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a great weekend. Cheers, Tony.